until that, we first have to understand each other.
Sure.
And you came to us. You didn't come to Pedo, so we would also like to know why. But before that, is it possible to introduce each other? Because I don't know you. You know each other, but I'd like to introduce.
Yeah, I think
that's
okay.
So yeah.
So I am Zubair Torwali.
Yeah.
I am from Bahrain, Swat, and Torwali. The second name is the name of my community, the Torwali community, indigenous community of that area. And I have been working as a researcher, writer, author, you can say, and I'm also leading an organization, indigenous organization, IBT, Idara Brai Talim wa Taraqi. That is Institute for Education and Development. We have been working on the languages, on the indigenous people's rights, on the indigenous culture, and etc., and education as well. And now I am also a member of this Daryai Swat Bachao Tehreek, the Swat River, Saving Swat River Protection Movement, Daryai Swat Bachao Tehreek, Save Swat River Movement. This movement was started in July last year, specifically focused on the Madian hydropower project and on the river Swat in our area and the entire Torwali community. So, yeah, I am a researcher. I'm also a linguist. Being engaged in different kind of language revitalization. So our language is endangered. It is one of the ancient languages of Swat, of the Gandhara period. So that's my introduction. And yeah, so to Bas Sheban Kulamara.
Let me introduce my
Yeah, you can go ahead.
I am Gurkhan. I belong to, as Mr. Zubair told, the Wali community. And by profession, I am an educationist, teacher, and belong to my community. And a member of the Swat Bachao community as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Usman Torwali, and I've been writing for several national leading babies. And apart from that, I am also a leader and leading a organization named the IRAC, which means that a group of people who are for translation. So we are
The group of people who are for.
Yarak is a traditional institution.
the Torwali language word,
Okay.
which means a group of people who do reconciliations and things like.
Okay. Yeah.
And we are doing seminars and other such activities on themes like civic education, peace education, and other youth engagement activities.
Okay.
So, and apart from this, I'm also a teacher.
Thank you. Sir?
मेरा नाम खानजादा है और bahrain ट्रेड फेडरेशन उर्दू एसोसिएशन का प्रेसिडेंट हूँ और मेरा ताल्लुक दरिया स्वात बचाओ तारीख से.
He is Khanzada. He is the president of the Trade Federation of Bahrain and also the president of the Hotel Association in that area. He has been active in the union working in the entire Swat area.
Okay.
So he's a social activist, unionist as well.
Yeah, good. So my name is Gailus Drogaris. I'm Lithuanian, so if you're a linguist, you know Lithuanian is one of the oldest languages, so I understand. Under the Soviet occupation, our language was being killed, so we appreciate the work that you do to try to keep the culture alive. I have been working in development and the World Bank for 30 years in East Asia, South Asia, Europe, Central Asia, and have been living in Islamabad in my current job for 4 years. And I'm very pleased to meet all of you, and maybe next.
So my name is Ki Hong Chen, senior English specialist based in Islamabad. I'm from Vietnam. I've been here for 6 months, and I'm past leader of the Madian project.
My name name is Ahmad Aslam. I'm Senior Environmental Specialist assigned to this project. I'm also assigned to a number of other hydropower projects in the bank. I've been associated with the group for now 12 years and with World Bank for last 8.5 years.
Assalamualaikum. मेरा नाम इमरान है. I'm Senior Social Development Specialist based in Islamabad. My main areas of expertise are large infrastructure, dams, hydropower, transportation, urban. I have been in the field of risk management for the last 26 years. I've just started 26 years of my professional experience here. I've been with NESPAC before that in consulting firms and with the bank for the last 12 years. So very pleased.
12 years. Right.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nafisa. I just joined the World Bank 6 months ago. I work as a consultant in youth development.
So thank you.
Over to you. How would you
yeah.
like to?
Thank you. And we are grateful that the task team is here, the project task team is here, and the manager operation is here for to listen to us, our concerns. And I am also grateful to you for being so kind that we can exchange many things.
Yeah.
So I have, as I think Imran and Ahmed and Tran, they know multiple things about this, our concerns already. So what I will do today is something which our concerns and demands which are related to the bank as well as the borrower. So I would, I don't know how much time it will take, but some points I will emphasize. First, all of you know about the project, the larger project, the KHRE, and the Madian Hydropower project is the major component of that project. So the financing and all these things and the time frame, not necessary to repeat it again. So I would focus some of the procedural errors or shortcomings in the ESIA of the project, also the environmental studies of the project, as well as violation of the bank ODs or OPs, you can say, and also ignoring the indigeneity of the local people of the project area of influence. So some of the, and then we will have a list of demands, what we want the project should look like, and what we will go from here. So this is the first slide, and I think it's not necessary to describe the details. So here is the project documents. I think the Madian HPP is located in an area where the Swat River is the main water source. Swat River, it's a long river, 40 kilometer high, but we are focused on the 40 kilometer area, and specifically on the 15 kilometer area, which falls in the AIO of the area. The project is in a rural Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so the 20 villages, the AIO of the project includes 20 villages with a population of 80,000 plus. And 80,000 plus, and majority, I think almost 90% of this population is the Torwali speaking people. We will have detail on that later on. So the land use and resettlement, the project and the ESIA are in the RAP. It requires 53 plus hectares land. 141 households are affected directly. 1,110 people are directly their lands to be accused for this project. In 6 villages, and several plans like the livelihood restoration and improvement plan and the social development plan have reportedly been prepared but not shared with the stakeholders, as in the RAP it is written a number of times, also in the ESIA, but these things we haven't seen these things in practice. compensation, I think it's again the finances, 5 million billion plus is for land and tree and all this, and then for this 80 million or so for. So I think these are not. Here is one thing. You see, the available allocation for the SDP, the Social Development Plan, is around PKR 1,500 million, but the tentative cost for Madhyan SDP is about 1724 million. So there is a shortage. You see, 224 plus 0.3 million. These things are mentioned. The actual cost is mentioned as 1724 million, but allocated is 15 million. So this is also one of the issues we have found in this documents.
Zubair, I'm sorry. Would you like to go through your presentation and then we do questions?
Okay.
Or do we stop and have
Okay,
questions?
fine.
How
I think I will have
you prefer one go?
one go and then you will get so. Now a failure to implement operational directive 4.2. The project failed to assess indigeneity at key stages, including feasibility study, impact assessment, and final approval. Second, absence of qualified experts and specialists to determine the presence and involvement of indigenous population violating OD 4.20. So this is from the bank side. No efforts were made to halt operations or investigate claims of indigeneity of the Torwali people in the project process. Flood zoning and scoping of the project of affected areas, inadequately accounting the full impact zones. Earlier, the banks earlier tribal policies on tribal people. The bank's policy state it will not assist projects encroaching on traditional territories without adequate safeguards. Project must effectively safeguard the integrity and well-being of tribal people. Screening is required to determine if indigenous people are present or have attachment to project areas, regardless of borrower's legal framework. In 1887, focus shifted from defining tribals by isolating to socio-cultural systems and ecological adaptation distinct from dominant societies. And the second one, again, the violation of OD 4.2. Screening criteria include self-identification as indigenous peoples, attachment to land and resources, customary institutions, and distinct indigenous language. I mean, this is by the bank. And so these were some of the violations we have. Now the harms, what we expect from this project, MHPP. Flawed feasibility studies. Initial studies prioritize technical and financial aspects, ignoring ecological and social impacts. Revised feasibility report and the environmental and social impact assessment failed to address challenges observed in similar projects such as the Daral Khod hydropower project, historical data and climate change. Reliance on outdated discharge data ignores the accelerating impacts of climate change, making current data and design parameters obsolete. So I think we can explain these things later on if you have questions. Sedimentation issues, tunnel-based projects exacerbate sedimentation, increase flood risk and threaten infrastructure and water availability. Seasonal water regulation, disrupted flow regulation and endangers aquatic life, reduces agricultural fertility downstream. Impacts of tunneling and control blasting. The proposed tunnel poses significant threats to spring water resources, crucial for the Torwali community, leading to potential food security, livelihood, and cultural identity disruptions. Now, socio-ecological and cultural. Indigenous knowledge and biodiversity conservation. The project threatens local conservation practices and inaccurately categorizes the Torwali people, undermining international frameworks like UNDRIP. Community consultation and participation. Limited consultations with local communities, excluding broader stakeholder groups, violate the World Bank's environmental and ESS Tourism impacts and economic disparities. The project neglects the significant role of tourism in the local economy, likely exacerbating economic disparities. Environmental flows and ecosystem health. The ESIA's provision for minimum environmental flow is insufficient to sustain the river's ecological, social, and climatic functions. And the additional concerns as the SDP and LRIP are mentioned many times here, but we see no documentation of these things, and we also see some transparency and accountability issues and these things. Inaccurate linguistic and cultural representation marginalize the Torwali community because in the ESIA. Failure to address cumulative environmental impacts threatens the long-term sustainability of the area's socio-ecological systems. Given these concerns, it is urged that World Bank withhold project. It was a summary. Withhold the project approval until the borrower demonstrates full compliance with its environmental and social framework, addresses community concerns, and implements tangible measures to mitigate identified risks and harms. And this, the next is the context of the, I think I will skip it because it's already you know it very well. Now, PEDO and its documented failings with respect to setting up large-scale hydropower projects. PEDO proposed over 60 projects in the IGCEP 2020, none of which were optimized for onboarding into the power plant. It is according to Pakistan's reports. Projects were found lacking due to weak PC1 forms and failure to conduct adequate hydrological risk assessments. Daral, another project completed by this PEDO, serves as a notable example of PEDO's failure. Failure to implement operational directives related to hydrological impacts. So these are lack of analysis on local streams. The project failed to adequately analyze the impact on local streams. Inadequate design and mitigation. The design of the project includes inadequate classifications of impacts and weak mitigation protocols. Impacts on local irrigation and agriculture. So there are multiple villages which will be affected by this project. Failure to model climate change impacts, and we see that no overall climate change studies were done in that area, especially in that area in entire Swat region before having this project. Human-induced changes to land quality and topography, increased geological hazards and flash flooding risk in that area. We have seen two more monster floods in the last 15 years. The narrow gorges in Kalam, Bahrain, and Madian, along with residential encroachments, have led to higher flood levels. And now the procedural, the consultation you see. ESIA dated 18 December 2023 documented community consultations conducted in various villages in towns from 14 June to 19 July 2022. Resettlement Action Plan, RAP, dated October 2023, mentions Jirga meetings and consultations occurring from June 22 to January 23rd. The total population of the administrative unit of Bahrain affected by the project is around 250,000, but only 248 individuals were consulted. 248. A mere 22% of the 1110 term project affected people. So out of those 1110 people, only 248 people were consulted. Inadequate consultative framework. According to community members, engagements were largely paperwork based with limited real interaction. We will be explaining it later on. Documented engagements did not include barometer surveys and were highly informal, occurring through local elites or bureaucratic intermediaries. Essential documents were not provided in local languages nor disseminated systematically in opposite forums. The project agreement required the establishment of a grievance redressal mechanism, but it was either not set up too late, or not made accessible. Zubair Torwali submitted a complaint on 26 August last year and later met the project task team on 1st October 2024 in Islamabad. Torwali was given alternate email address by World Bank task to resubmit his complaint indicating the lack of a formal grievance mechanism by PDO. So I was given an email by my this task team and I had no access to PDO's any grievance mechanism for that. On 3rd October 2024, Mr. Torwali formally emailed PDO raising several issues including, I have proved that, economic and financial impacts on the local tourism industry, poisoning and drying up of the freshwater springs is crucial for the local population. These were the contents of my email. Disruption of indigenous cultural practices around the river, lack of community benefits, education, health, electrification, etc., employment, lack of compensation for land damage due to construction. PDO responded on 13th of November that year, largely referencing previous assessments like the SIA and RAP without acknowledging their gaps. Major parts of the management's response, such as stakeholder engagement and mitigation measures for socio-ecological harms, were omitted. Mr. Torwali's point regarding the precedent of the Daral hydropower project was ignored, with the unrelated argument about Pakistan energy security needs presented instead. In a meeting on 30th October 2024 in Bahrain, PDO officials agreed to revise the ASIA and RAP text and conduct new consultation with the local public. However, no progress has been reported, while site preparation activities, including the divergent tunnel, have continued. Despite the need for a grievance filing system, neither PDO nor the World Bank have expedited the establishment. There is no stipulation for a third-party mediator in the project agreement, which leaves PDO a majoritarian state entity, Pashtun-dominated entity, to resolve complaints, creating a conflict of interest given the politically disenfranchised status of the Torwali people. Absence of relevant experts and specialist personnel, no social scientist was hired to evaluate the indigeneity questions and their implications for the project design and mitigation of experts. The ASIA and RAP misrepresented the local people by labeling them as Kohistanis and tribes of Yusufzai Pathans, ignoring their true identity. Now the question of indigeneity of the Torwali community. Torwali people's historical and cultural background. The Torwali people are the ancient and original inhabitants of the Bahrain, Tahsil and Swat district, historically called Torwal. This district was. They were colonized by invaders in the 11th and 16th centuries. Criteria for the indigeneity fulfilled by Torwali people as described by World Bank. The Torwali self-identify as indigenous people. They call themselves indigenous. They have a collective attachment to land and natural resources, including forests, pastures, agricultural fields, springs, and the river Swat. They manage these resources using customary practices and rely on customary laws encoded as Riwaj, as Riwajat, and continued under Pata, the provincial administered tribal areas. They use social institutions like Dhimi to manage resources. Dhimi is a system, we will explain it. And like the Yarak, the Torwali language is a distinct language and endangered language. So verification of indigenous status. The Torwali status as an indigenous community is verified by the ADB report. ADB and identifying them as extending tribal status. Consideration to the majority of the population, ADB has its own criteria for that. Torwali ecological stewardship and forest management, ecological stewardship. So here I mentioned Bahadur Almanac. So we have, the Torwali people have a seasonal calendar of their own, which is different from other calendars, Gregorian or other calendars, and they mostly use this calendar for sowing and for their, for cultivation and for harvesting. And they have this phases like Gup and Sul. These are the stars, and this calendar was designed 200 years ago by Torwali elder men at that time, and it is still in use. So this is very indigenous to these people, and we can have more discussion on that if you want. And there is, under this Bahadur scheme, so Bahadur was a wise man, indigenous wise man. So he also designed a water distribution system in a particular area of this project area of influence in Gurnal. So that distribution system is mainly, very scientific but very indigenous to that area. There are the entire village water was distributed into different phases, and it is still used by those people. Customary management of forest. The Torwali community's forest management practices are deeply rooted in the centuries of sustainable stewardship, but are increasingly threatened by external interventions. So we have this traditional system of forest protection and forest stewardship. We will talk more about that. Historical insights from historian Sultan Rome highlight the central role of forest in Torwali life of cultural, spiritual, and practical needs. The mid-19th century saw disruptions from large-scale commercial logging introduced by, so this was the state area when we were preserving our forests, and when these people came from Kakahel, Naushera, from Naushera areas, outsiders, so they destroyed our forests largely. Fourth, the Pakistani state retained this system but failed to preserve forests effectively. By the 1980s, increasing royalty incentivized deforestation and collusion, accelerated forest destruction. It is also legally in Pakistani terms. We can discuss it more. Indigenous practices have ensured sustainable forest management and ecological resilience, contrasting with the history of exploitation. Sultan Rum, the historian, challenges the myth that the Swat state forests were communally and sustainably managed. His analysis highlights the lack of formal management and the importance of recognizing distinct Torwali systems. Lugay. The Dautar and Lugay, Dhimi, system of forest governance, distribute shares among Dautaris and royalties among households. This Dhimi is very particular to the Torwali people, while we can say the Dautar is altogether in practice in Swat. So there is a committee in my village. There are many forest committees, protection committees traditionally managed by the people of the villagers. For example, the committee of my village, the Torwali community is Riwaj. Riwaj is the customary laws, governs access to natural resources, and imposes strict controls on deforestation through the forest protection committees. So this is also like a form of Yarak, a council of people that protect their. A landmark decision over 25 years ago by this particular people bared Bakarwal herders, the grazer, in the forest, and the forest has now been increased 60%, more than 60%. This is one example. We have such example in every village. And I mention it because of having the stewardship of the forest and local customary laws. Now, River Swat and mountain springs, our folklore, the Torwali folklore and the Torwali folk tales, we call this river, the River Swat Gennad. Gennad is big river, so because there is no other big river in that area, that's why we have many myths, mythologies, our folk tales, folklore is around that. And mountain springs, we call them Gudur, where people, especially women, come together to discuss their daily lives and to sing and to share their stories. And it is also, we can say, hydro heritage. So the springs, the pastures, the mountains, the lakes, they are very central to the Torwali way of life, of their folklore and their folk life. And distinct socio-cultural systems, as my friend mentioned, Yarak. Yarak is like, you can say, a traditional council of the village people. They practice it, and they call it when there is a dispute or there is a management of the forest or management of the land or such issues. Cultural practices, so rituals, festivals, oral poetry, all these are around these springs and other things. And indigenous language, as I mentioned in my introduction, so this Torwali is spoken by 140,000 people, 140,000, yeah. And we have been working for the revitalization of this language for the last 2 decades. So that indicates our commitment to our language and to our heritage. And we are very marginalized, and in every social development and education and political and socio-economic terms, we are very marginalized in that area. And now bank policy, bank focus, tribal and later indigenous people, so expansion of focus. Banks early focus on tribal groups, expanded to align with evolving international norms on indigenous people's rights, ensuring full respect for their dignity, human rights, and cultural uniqueness. This is bank is very sensitive towards that. Assertion of tribal identity, the broader understanding allows the Torwali people to assert tribal identity. If we are not indigenous, then we are tribal. Through distinct socio-cultural systems, ecological adaptations, and modes of protection, strengthening their claim for enhanced protections. Now, MHP, substantial violations from MHP. The ESIA inaccurately categorized the Torwali people as non-indigenous without having any anthropologist or sociologist. The project endangers the Torwali community's stewardship of the biodiversity and water resources. Broader stakeholder groups, especially those indirectly affected, were excluded from consultations. Indigenous peoples were not provided information in a culturally appropriate manner. Consultations were held with individuals or groups not legitimate representatives chosen by the community. Feasibility studies ignored ecological and social impacts. Promised documents like the SDPs and LRIP remained unavailable. Hydrology studies relied on outdated data, ignoring climate change impacts overall after the 2 monster floods. River flow regulation disruption jeopardized aquatic life, agriculture, and ecosystem. Tunnel-based construction threatened spring water resources. The project threatens Bahrain's town economy, relying on the Swat River and tourism. Proposed water flow is inadequate for ecological and social functions. Cumulative impacts from multiple hydropower projects threaten long-term sustainability. So conclusion, we can say lessons and recommendations we can provide here. Early comprehensive assessments, legal and social context need to be thoroughly assessed early in the project planning stages. Respect for indigenous structure, indigenous people's decision-making structure and customary practices must be respected. Culturally appropriate mechanisms, information disclosure and consultation mechanisms should be culturally appropriate. Adequate screening processes, proper screening processes are necessary to identify indigenous peoples and ensure their inclusion. Without addressing these systematic issues, the risk of harm to indigenous communities such as the Torwali people and project failure remains unacceptably high. And climate risk, this is an overall overview of the climate situation in Pakistan. Let me skip it as well. So, concerns and demand. The Torwali community, the indigenous inhabitants of the Swat Valley, is deeply concerned about the impact of the Madian hydropower project on the river Swat. The river, known historically as Suvastu, is an integral part of their heritage, culture, and identity. The planned 207 megawatt project, funded by the World Bank and implemented by the Patankhwa, this PIDO, involves diverting the river into a 12-kilometer tunnel, bypassing Bahrain town and adjacent tourist areas. This development threatens the economic and ecological stability of the region, endangering the river, the local economy, and the cultural identity of the Torwali people. The Torwali people fear that the project will cause irrecoverable damage to their environment and way of life. They emphasize their deep connection to the river and their reliance on it for their livelihood. They argue that the project, which diverts the river beyond Madian town, will devastate the river and the indigenous communities around it. The plea. The Torwali people have extensively studied the project's documents, safeguard policies, and social standards developed by the World Bank. They assert their intimate knowledge of the locally developed environment, which is not adequately reflected in the project's assessments. They request the World Bank to withdraw from the project, citing the potential threat to the local people and the bank's reputation. They call for the establishment of an independent panel of experts to investigate the matter, focusing on the following issues: failure to implement Operational Directive 402 on indigenous peoples, despite the presence of indigenous Torwali people in the project zones; failure to implement Operational Directive 4.12 on involuntary resettlement, excluding vulnerable groups in the project zones; inadequate identification and mitigation of hydrological and climatological risk, despite the project's high socio-ecological impact and environmentally category A classification; flawed threat assessment methods for gauging and mitigating biodiversity risk; failure to evaluate the cumulative effects of interconnected hydropower projects on local ecology, biodiversity, and river health. The Torwali people urge the World Bank to address these concerns and reconsider the involvement in the project. Given our assessment and the potential threats, we fundamentally oppose the current design of the Madian hydropower project. Our assessment indicates that the project poses a grave threat to the local population and environment under the guise of development. We demand a comprehensive re-evaluation of the project by the concerned authorities. And if dialogue is to be continued with the PEDO, we demand that PEDO undertake the following actions in order to proceed in the dialogue. If PEDO is interested to have dialogue with us, so we demand for that dialogue to be continued. We demand the following actions: immediate halt of the project activities, PEDO should do that; suspension of land acquisition in the area; suspension of funds, and re-examination of key documents, the ASIA and the RAP, and also translation of these documents into Torwali, Pashto, and Gujri languages, and that is spoken in that the project area of influence. So there is a case of Daral hydropower project by PEDO, 36 megawatt project in that area. This is Daral Hod hydropower project. So it was also completed by PEDO. It started in 2012 and completed by 2018, and it was initially funded by ADB, Asian Development Bank, but later when we started raising our concerns with the ADB and the PEDO, then it was shadow. So the latter, ADB withdrew from the project in that case, and this project has, I would say that if PEDO has not done this project, people would have not opposed the Madian hydropower project. So this is a case study, an eye-opener for everybody. So that's why people of the Torwali people of that particular area are too hostile to this Madian hydropower project. Thank you.